Imagine this. It's a typical Sunday afternoon. You're sitting in the service. The choir is singing. The whole congregation is participating in worship. When suddenly the back doors of the church burst open and a man wearing military fatigues, a flak jacket, a rifle, armed with several guns, suddenly screams out across the room, "This is war." And before you have time to react, he just starts shooting. People are getting hit with round after round. This is exactly what happened in a church back in 1980 in Dangerfield, Texas. And it was the action of three men that immediately and without thought engaged the bad guy and was able to get him outside and stop the killing. Today we're breaking down the 1980 Dangerfield Church Massacre, the lessons it left behind, and what you need to do right now to prepare your mind for an armed confrontation. Because when the moment comes, will you act or will you freeze? On June 22, 1980, in Dangerfield, Texas, at the First Baptist Church, the congregation of about 350 people were in the process of worship, singing a song, when the killer came in armed to the teeth and prepared to kill. The killer was a former school teacher, a math teacher is my understanding, and he was facing sexual assault charges against his daughter. He had gone to the church previously looking for character witnesses, and when people at the church refused, he decided he was going to get revenge. And he showed up at the church and he ended up killing 5 people and injuring 10 more. So once the shooting started, we actually had 3 unarmed men that jumped into action to save lives. Their names are James McDaniel, Kenneth Truitt, and Chris Hall. So they fought back. Chris Hall, who is younger, more athletic, jumped on the back of the bad guy, which bought some time for McDaniel and Truitt. McDaniel jumped up from the back seat where he was sitting towards the back of the church. He runs and basically gets involved in the fight and starts fighting back with the bad guy, which also bought some time for Truitt to also run in and get involved in the fight. They were able to get him outside of the church. Unfortunately, outside the church, both of those men were shot fatally and they died. The bad guy, he fled the immediate area and tried to commit suicide, but he was unsuccessful. So why does this matter? Hall, Truitt, McDaniel, they were untrained fighters. None of them were in the military, none of them were law enforcement, none of them was security. But when the threat came, when the evil came into the church, they sprang into action. They were mentally and spiritually prepared to engage this bad guy, to risk their own lives, to save their families and to save their congregation. And so like a lot of us, we don't have that military background. We don't have law enforcement background. We don't have security background. So what is it that we can do as safety team members, if people that have raised their hand and said, hey, I'm going to join the safety ministry and I'm willing to do what it takes to protect people. We need to prepare our minds. We need to be like them. We need to prepare mentally and spiritually. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today with our 3 lessons learned from this incident. Lesson number 1, train your mind to act. When violence erupts, your brain doesn't have time to think. It just reacts. You will do what you've trained yourself to do. So McDaniel and Truitt, they weren't trained professionals. They were everyday men. No military background. They'd had no police experience. They had no tactical training. But when the moment came, they acted. Conduct mental rehearsals on a regular basis. Anytime you're working at church, you're patrolling the outside of the church, or you're patrolling the inside or the back hallways and stairwells, or whatever you're doing while you're working as a safety team member, I want you to go through these mental rehearsals. I want you to think about, hey, if right now I heard gunfire coming from the parking lot, what would I do? What would I do if all suddenly I heard some yelling and screaming coming from the children's area and it sounded like it was potentially violent? What would I do? What would I do if I'm sitting inside the sanctuary and somebody suddenly jumps up, starts screaming at the pastor or runs towards the pastor? What is my action? How am I going to respond? And what you'll be doing is you're preparing yourself mentally and you're rehearsing mentally of what needs to be done in these kind of emergencies. And so when that action actually occurs, you've thought about it. You've thought about it a lot. And you're mentally and physically prepared because, one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is mental preparation prepares your body as well. Olympic athletes use mental rehearsal in order to do their sport, to do their activity, whatever it is, to the best of their ability. And if it works for them, it'll work for you. Lesson number 2, wrestle with your convictions. Probably just the fact that you're watching this video, you've probably already made a moral decision between just defense and Christian pacifism. The thing is this, is we need that belief that you probably already have to be concrete. We need it to be really, really solid in the very depths of your soul. And so to do that, one of the things we have to do is we need to get into God's Word. We really need to study just defense. You can get online and you could Google just defense and read what people smarter than you and I have discovered, right? Pastors and theologians that have studied this topic for a long time. But I'm also going to ask you to do something that's going to sound like it's not going to help you very much. And that is, we also need to study Christian pacifism. Because if you're ever involved in an event, if you're ever involved in where you've had to use deadly force, you better believe a little voice is going to pop up in the back of your mind and it's going to start telling you how you should turn the other cheek and do all these other kind of things. And so if you're not firm in that position, if you're not aware of what that voice is going to be saying, you're going to be unprepared and it's going to cause a problem for you. And so I highly encourage, look into both of them. There's lots of verses. I'm just going to give you a few right now that are out there. So for just defense point of view, we're talking Nehemiah 4:14. We're talking Exodus 22:2. We're talking Luke 22, verse 36. We're talking Romans 13:4. And then when it comes to Christian pacifism view, we need to read Matthew 5:39, Matthew 26:52, Romans 12:19. And by studying this, what this is going to do, even the passive stuff, is you'll find, and what I found is this, is the pacifism helped me create balance in my beliefs of just defense, and it actually strengthened my position in just defense. Lesson number 3, conduct stress-based scenario drills. So training, right? We know it's always about training. When violence strikes, panic takes over those who aren't prepared. The brain freezes when it's overwhelmed. But McDaniel, Truitt, and Hall, they didn't freeze because they weren't making decisions in the moment. They had already made them. They already decided as men that they would defend their families. They would defend the congregation. It was part of their character. And when the shooting started, they jumped to their feet and they took action. So how do we prepare for that? How does our team get ready for that? And what we do is simply this. We make training as realistic as possible. We want to get our brain, our training must simulate the stress of a real attack, right? We don't learn how to swim by reading a book or watching a video. We learn by getting in the water. Same thing goes for these kind of drills. It's great that you're watching this video. I'm hoping it helps you a lot. But at the end of the day, we have to get together as a team and we have to have real training that that brings up stress, that challenges us. So we need to train under chaos. Most safety teams train by talking through scenarios in a quiet room. But real violence is not that way at all, right? It's fast, it's loud, it's overwhelming. So your training has to match reality. The first time that you're experiencing high stress in this kind of combat environment doesn't need to be during the actual event. It needs to be during training. So let's talk about a couple ways we could do that. So the one way is reactionary drills, right? So what you do is you get your team together. You have some basic explanations of how to handle different kinds of emergencies. Hopefully you have a long list of emergency action plans that you've trained together as a team. And then as you get together, maybe at the church on a Saturday when nobody else is there, or whatever day of the week when nobody else is there, you as the leader, you as a member, you get on the radio. Everyone understands it's a training event. And you get on the radio and you call out a medical. You call out a fire. You call out an active shooter. You call out a disturbance somewhere in the church. And the idea here is this, is everybody understands there's a training event that day, but they don't know what it's going to be. And they just know that it's going to come over the radio. Now, if you're using a radio that can be scanned, just as a cautionary tale, make sure you say, this is a training exercise, this is a training exercise, and then call out, there's a fire in the kitchen. There's a fire in the kitchen. And then allow your team to react, to grab their fire extinguishers, run in that direction. Or if it's an active shooter that's outside the church, that they run to the exterior doors and make sure they're locked and monitored and all that kind of stuff. So if the bad guy tries to break in, they're ready for it. The idea here is you're just throwing these things out and then you're testing their reaction on each one of these and they don't know what's going to happen. So that's kind of your reactionary drills. The other thing is stress exposure, right? So as you're doing this kind of training, if you can, add loud noises, flashing lights, screaming, all that, whatever it takes. Like if it's an active shooter that's in the sanctuary, right? There's going to be yelling and screaming and people moving about. So bring in actors, bring in people that volunteer to help you create chaos. If we can activate the fire alarm with the flashing lights, if we can turn off the lights, whatever it is, what we want to do is create as much stress and chaos as we possibly can to make these things realistic as possible. Also add in non-lethal force-on-force training. It's great to get together and shoot paintball at each other or airsoft at each other and all that kind of stuff. Great training and all that kind of stuff. But we also want to add in that it's not always going to be deadly. Get some inert pepper spray or it squirts the water at people. Maybe even introduce some unarmed self-defense. And the idea here is, once again, we're elevating stress because as your team members go into that training exercise, they don't know if it's going to end in deadly force. They don't know if it's going to end in pepper spray. They don't know how it's going to end. And so because they don't know, it's a mystery to them, they have to roll with the punches. They have to adjust, and that increases the stress level. And quite frankly, that's most realistic, isn't it? Is that we don't know what we're going to see when we get there, and we don't know what the proper reaction is going to be until we get there and evaluate it. Training saves lives. So McDaniel, Truitt, and Hall, they didn't have any formal training, but they still acted. So imagine how much stronger your team would be with the right preparation. And so that's one of the things about the safety member certification program we have. One of the things that's included in that comes with it, is the safety drills manual. And so it has all kinds of drills you could put together. And it takes you from what do you need to do to prepare it, and then run the drill, and then evaluate the results of that drill so your team can continually get better. And not only that, so that's a freebie that you get with the safety member certification. But we also have an add-on, which is our active shooter drills. And so this manual is just packed with active shooter scenarios that you and your team can work through and really, really, really prepare your team for this kind of event. So I really want to encourage you to check that out. The men at Dangerfield were not trained professionals. They didn't have tactical experience or specialized skills, but when evil entered the church, they didn't hesitate. They moved, and because of that, lives were saved. The question is, will you be ready when it's your moment? Apply these 3 lessons. Train your mind, settle your convictions, prepare your team, because when the time comes, you won't have time to think. You'll have all you can do is you're going to either act or you're not going to act. So if you like this video, please subscribe and check out our other videos. I think you'll find those very helpful to you as you're developing as a safety team member. And hey, let's be careful out there.